So, why do you need to know about the different consciousnesses when we talk about astrology? Well, because consciousness and astrology go hand in hand, because astrology is kind of reflected everywhere. It's not separate from life. So, when people say, oh, your chart doesn't dictate your life, well, yes and no. The chart is a symbol of the life you chose to live. How you choose to act on that energy is up to you. And when we talk about free will, that's where things play out differently. And why one person with one set of energy that seems similar to someone else will do vastly different things. It depends on how that consciousness is being expressed. And that's why I break it down into the 3 levels of consciousness. And trust me, there are so many layers in between this. It's much more complex, and I've oversimplified it just for an ease of understanding in the introduction to the idea. But when it comes to free will, no one was taught how to use theirs. As growing up, you probably heard, well, you had a choice. Did you? Did you really? When from the time you can input information into your own mind, it was information being fed to you. This is how the world works, right? You've been told that a million times. This is how the world works, or the world doesn't work that way. Your family has history, and society has beliefs. And for the first at least 20 years of your life, you've been experiencing life really from a limited range of choices, even if you're rebelling against the norms, because it's a program, right? Almost all the different personality archetypes are still programs within society. So when people talk about unplugging from the Matrix, if you watched all the Matrix movies, you found out at the end, people are still playing a program. Well, it kind of works that way, because it's easy to believe you're enacting free will when you push up against things, right? Even when you're bending the spoon, even when you are the spoon. If you've watched The Matrix, it's a reference. So here's the deal. You can learn how to exercise your free will. It takes time. It takes self-examination, and it takes observation of your own unique reactionary patterns. Because the more you can choose to respond, the less you're acting in mass consciousness, instinctual consciousness, and the more you're coming from a deliberate and self-actualized consciousness. The goal might be to become enlightened. It might not be. It might just be that life doesn't suck so bad, or it doesn't hurt as much. And that's why I teach consciousness in correlation with astrology, because it's really, really easy to use astrology as an excuse for bad behavior. It can be, or for not being proactive in your life, because it's easy to say, oh, I have this placement and then I'm always going to be this way. But it's not true. There's a lot of different ways that energy can express. And so if you go to the blog, I'm writing more and more articles about this. This is a new site. I've been teaching these things offline for a really, really long time. I believe we come here as humans. We choose to be born, and we do. We choose to come into this life. It chooses a tricky word, especially if you've suffered from childhood trauma or had things happen in life that didn't feel like you could have possibly wanted to have chosen them. But we choose to have a range of experiences. And when we're young, we don't have as much choice in the matter, right? I talked about that. The first 30 years. That's why the Saturn return could be so uncomfortable. And I'll have a whole video about Saturn returns. But that's the opportunity to either fall in line with society or choose your own authority. And sometimes those don't mix well when it comes to those decisions. And it can be an either or kind of consciousness, like, and it's stressful when there's a lot of resistance pulling between two ends. And there is a middle way. Buddha was very right about that. There's a middle path. You can step off the polarity, but it requires a lot of awareness of self. And astrology is a great way to gain that. However, what I see happening a lot online when I go onto Reddit or I'm on Facebook and in the various groups is a lot of destiny-oriented thinking. Like all Geminis are like this, and all Scorpios are like this, and all Sagittarians are like this, Sagittarians. All Capricorns are like this, all Cancers are like this. And there's a lot of vilification of the signs, or a lot of, this sign's better than that sign. And first of all signs are equal. How the consciousness expresses it, it used to be people said in a positive or a negative way. And I'm just going to say, if it's instinctual, if it's transactional, or if it's transcendent, which is self-actualized. Because when you get into the self-actualized consciousness, sometimes those old ways of interpreting the energy don't match up as well. So when you do a reading for someone who's very self-actualized, and age doesn't really play a factor in that as much, but it can, just through life experience and practice. And self-actualization is a process. It's not something, nobody's born self-actualized. Some people might be more self-aware than others, but nobody's totally self-actualized, because we're all raised by parents, and we all have media coming at us. We all have various social programs and cultural indoctrinations. Everybody's indoctrinated, okay? You've been indoctrinated your whole life by different cultural beliefs, whether it was anti-establishment or it was establishment, it doesn't matter. You've been indoctrinated. And so until you unpack that and really know what's yours and what isn't, you can't say you're self-actualized. Well, you can, but you won't be, because you determine who you are when you're self-actualized. You go, oh, this is mine. This comes from my culture, but I really like it. I'm going to keep it. Well, that's a deliberate choice. If you're operating off of, this is how the world works, it's always worked this way, this was how my family's always done things, I'm not going to consider anything else. Well, you've made a choice, but you defaulted. You made a default decision. It's like a default program, and you're not going to deviate from that program. And there's no right or wrong to this, but just know what you're doing. Because the minute you make the conscious decision to default, you're actually still more deliberate than if you never thought about it at all. And the reason I'm really passionate about this is because the more deliberate we can be, the more people who self-actualize, we don't need a ton of us, but the more we do it, the more solutions we come up with the changes coming into the world. We're looking at massive systemic change right now in the world. And we need innovation, and we need people who think differently. And so the more you can enact your free will, the more innovative you're going to be, because you're not going to try to keep doing the same things over and over and over that have been done forever, that has been out of balance, that has been not beneficial to many. And funny enough, mass consciousness keeps itself where it's at by adhering to the social programs. Even if they rebel, even if the peasants with the pitchforks go out into the streets and cause a revolution, it brings us right back to where we started. Immediately, whoever comes into control will be a despot. It's happened over and over and over. And I'd love to see humanity do something different this time. So by actualizing ourselves, we gain more control over how we respond to things. It doesn't mean we don't ever get angry or don't ever have a bad day or don't ever have problems, but we take more responsibility for how we want to be in the world and how we are in ourselves and how we respond to life. And that is a much more fulfilling way to be. So free will and astrology can go hand in hand. You're not fated to ever have this horrible destiny, even if you started out really, really rough. I know this for a fact because I experienced vast amount of childhood trauma, and using many modalities and astrology as a guide, and knowing what my own energies were in myself, the archetypes that made me up on all levels, whether I'm being instinctual in my fight and flight mode, or I'm being transactional in what's socially acceptable, or when I'm actually self-determinate, and how that expresses. And it took a long time. And it took being, funny enough, socially isolated for about 17 years. I lived on an island and couldn't get off for love or money, even though I tried. So I had a lot of time to self-reflect in my 30s and early 40s to really get to know who I was and go on an amazing healing journey. And astrology was one of the many, many, many tools I used. Understanding the brain, understanding brain chemistry, understanding the connection with the body was also part of that. And we can show it astrologically because astrology is kind of a map. It's a code, it's a language. And when you can unlock that understanding, it gets so much better. And life can be so much better. And then you do get to have the career and the fulfillment and the relationships and what have you. And yeah, timing plays a role, but it's not ever about an overwhelming amount of fate. Okay. It's never about that. You really can steer your shit yourself. So that's why I talk about consciousness and astrology. So I'd like you to join me. A lot of the people I'm meeting on Reddit are just new to astrology. You're just coming in. And I think a lot of you young people, especially young people, and I say before your Saturn return, are hitting astrology is we are in a crisis. And you guys have already had, especially, you kids with, well, you're not kids, but you people with Pluto and Sagittarius, you've really experienced some interesting things in life already. And so it's going to be feeling a little chaotic. You were told go to school. You were told get degrees. You were told the world worked a certain way, and now we're in the middle of the whole damn thing changing, and you're like, what the hell am I supposed to do now? What does my career look like? What do my relationships look like? Will I ever be able to own a house? And if you're older, you're probably asking the same questions because really we're all being faced with that. But the younger you can get this information, the better. You're not lost. If you're over 40, you can learn it too. But the younger you can get this, the more you're empowered with a tool that can really make a difference in your life. So I'll be having some basic astrology information available, and just to help you get going, because what I do see out there, one, it's not always presented in a really kind of fun way to learn. And I think learning needs to be fun. And it's also presented in ways that I think aren't as relevant to today's world. I think we could use a refresh of how we discuss astrology. And I'd really love to invite you to the groups. I know there's not a lot of people in them right now, but I would invite you to come in and have some discussions, because discussing astrology is really one of the best ways to learn it, having discussions, not debates, but discussions, and learning about that. And I'm here to answer those questions for you and give you resources to go look up and help you decide for yourselves what it is you want to take or leave, because you should question everything, including me. You know, that's really, really important. You know, use your noodle. That's why you have one. Anyway, I'm Lori Rivers, and that's what I think about free will and astrology.